Hey, we are talking about Moon Knight, episode 2, Summon the Suit. We are going to talk, and we're going to give a spoiler free review of the episode, and then we're going to get into a spoiler breakdown of the episode. Starting now. Welcome to Nerd Social. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Colin.
Hey, so the spoiler free logline for this episode is with little time to react, Steven is thrust into a war of the gods, as a mysterious partner arrives. So, Colin, what do you think of this episode?
I think that this episode was definitely a little bit of a letdown from episode one. I think episode one was much more wackier. It was really fun. It was intense. There was all sorts of things that was great about it. This one was a little bit more muted because I think that they were trying to peel away a lot of the layers. As to how Steven became Marc and Marc became Steven. So they're peeling away. So it was a little bit more slow because it was more character driven. And you didn't really get to see Arthur that much in this episode. You saw him you probably saw him a few less times than you did in the first episode. But overall, I think it was still solid. But yeah, in terms of the intensity, in terms of the wackiness, the actions, definitely not as strong as the first one. But I can understand why they did that, just to kind of, again, take a step back to kind of look at it from the standpoint of, okay, let's do some more character development. Let's try to dive into these characters a little bit more, and let's try to make sure that we tell a good story to kind of carry it over to the next few episodes, so that and this is what Marvel does very well, is that kind of do these deep dives so that people will feel invested in their characters. Unlike there's some other things that we've seen in the past and we complain about all the time, Marvel actually does do a good job of that in general. So yeah, much slower, but definitely still enjoyed it overall.
Yeah, I think I agree with your general assessment. I think that this episode isn't as good as the first one, but it's not terrible. It's definitely a bridge episode. I will say that where you say that the first episode you didn't get a whole lot with Arthur, it's partly because we have an introduction of a new character. So this episode is really the introduction of this new character, and you get a sense of this new character. But you get somewhat of an introduction to this character. I assume you'll get more later on down the line. But this, I think the three characters, well, unless you I guess you count, you can count Oscar Isaac as more than one character. So the four or five characters, three of which are like embodied in Oscar Isaac, I think are going to be the main focus of the show. So I think it was important to establish this character, but it was also like you said, it was a little slow in parts. Doing the character development, it's a bit of a bridge episode. Even though we didn't get a lot of Ethan Hawke in this episode, I did appreciate what they did with him. You have more, you give him more nuance, and you're almost like with him until he has a bit of a conversation, and we'll talk about that conversation when we get to the spoiler part of this of our talk. But yeah, when you take it out to the logical conclusion, his worldview kind of breaks down a little bit. But you're with him for part of the conversation. So yeah, I appreciate it with what Ethan Hawke is doing in this episode, and then actually both of the episodes. He's very he's playing the cult leader very, very well. He's very, very gentle, and you can see, and very, very charismatic, and you can tell why people might follow this guy. There's
Right.
We saw in the previous episodes some interaction between Marc and Steven. There's a lot of that, a lot more of that in this episode, which is also can be fun and also can be funny as well. And Oscar Isaac is doing a great job in both of those parts. So yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess we can start talking about the episode, start breaking it down, and all right. So before we do that, if you're enjoying the conversation, please join in by commenting down below. Oh, and please like and subscribe to help us out in the channel. We really appreciate it. And with that, we will get into spoiler talk. So go see the episode. Spoilers ahead. All right, what do you want to talk about?
I think it was very interesting to start at the beginning where we saw him at the end of the first episode. He was beating up the jackal, right?
Mm-hmm.
They identified him that he was that the creature that was chasing after him was a jackal, and so then he again wakes back up in his room and just basically doesn't know what happened again, disoriented, and then he tries to jump out of the bed, and then he forgot to unlock himself. He actually fell on the floor, just like what you saw in the trailer. And so it was very interesting to kind of see again that disorienting feeling right at the beginning of it, very similar to what the first episode was, where Arthur was putting the glass in his shoes. So it's like another type of disorienting, you don't know where it's going type of thing, and then having him have this type of, again, this dissociative type of experience, and then going to the museum and then trying to figure out, oh, what the heck happened to me,
Right.
And yeah, and all that. So that was actually very fascinating there at the very beginning of it, and again, just took you again by surprise. But again, they're trying to they're trying to peel the layers off slowly.
Yeah. The beginning was definitely. I think they're still playing with disorienting the audience in the same way that Steven is disoriented, because he wakes up, like you say, the last thing we saw was Moon Knight, but that wouldn't be the last thing that he. The last place that he was. The last place he was in a bathroom, and a jackal was breaking down the door. Right.
Right.
So and then he wakes up in a bed. So he wakes up in a panic, because the last thing that he was panicked. That's why
right.
he jumps out of the bed. So that was interesting. Yeah. So he goes to the museum. They're putting up a bunch of caution tape because they're closing part of the exhibits. So he knows that it's not something actually did happen. He's not imagining the things anyway. And he assumes that the images will be caught on the surveillance video. So he goes to I forget what the guy's name is. Is it
Scott?
No, Scott is what the guy thinks his name is.
Oh, Scott. Okay, yeah.
I think it's maybe Bill. Maybe it's Billy.
Yeah.
No, well, no, actually, that's not Billy. It's I forget what his name is. But anyway, the security guard who thinks his name is Scotty, and he always corrects him that his name is Steven. He goes to his station to watch the video, and you basically just see Steven running around with nothing chasing him, which makes you think, the same thing that the security guard is thinking, like he hallucinated the whole thing, right? Except for when they talk about the bathroom, like he destroyed the bathroom. Now I guess he could have destroyed the bathroom himself. He could have been hallucinating that there was a monster, and he could have destroyed the bathroom himself. And I think at this point, Steven doesn't know, right? He doesn't. He knows what he remembers, but he also sees the video, right? So he thinks. I think at this point he might think that maybe he just had a break, and he thought something was chasing him, and nothing was actually chasing him. So yeah. So
I was really surprised as though they did not show the bathroom. I mean, I don't know if museums have surveillance cameras in bathrooms. I think that's probably not allowed.
No,
maybe for privacy reasons. So yeah,
if they were able to show it, there's probably no coverage of Moon Knight. Like it seems like when you're right. So like when he wanted to see when he came out of the bathroom, he did not come out of the bathroom as Moonlight. He came out of the bathroom as Marc.
Right.
So I think that you're right. Until he saw Marc's face, he might have thought that he went mad himself, or maybe he was hallucinating things. But when he looked back at the image, looking back at him, he knew that wasn't him. He knew it was Marc's face. They have a
Right.
different. They hold themselves a little bit differently in space, so he knew it wasn't him. It's
Yeah.
it's funny.
But
When,
I just find it very interesting in that how could they imagine that Steven would destroy the bathroom like that, and they just didn't show it. It's just like, what you think that Steven's strong enough to destroy that? That's kind of a little bit peculiar, don't you say? Don't you think that he's able to have that level of destruction?
I mean, maybe,
even though if he's like going mad or something like that.
maybe I think that.
Yeah.
So like, this is a world where superheroes exist. So sure, you could slot in a supernatural. You can slot in a supernatural reason for what happened, but like most people in the world aren't superheroes. Most people in the world don't have super strength. So,
Right.
and I imagine Steven has been acting weird for a very long time because he goes to HR instead of being escorted by the police, and they have a very nice chat with him about seeking help. So I feel like a lot of his colleagues see him as weird and odd and already. So I think they just make the logical conclusion instead of leaping to the conclusion that something like supernatural is happening. That maybe he just went into like a fugue state or something and just started ripping stuff up. I mean, I think it would probably take him at his normal strength a few hours to do that much damage as opposed to a few minutes. But I mean, he could probably still do it. I mean, it's just like a bunch of broken glass. All the sinks were broken and things like that. A normal person probably couldn't break any of those things with their hands.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm thinking.
But if he was acting weird, if he was standing on top of them, he could break them. So yeah. So,
okay, I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. So he gets fired. And they suggest some NHA services for him. And then he goes to talk to Crawley, which is the living statue in the park. And through that conversation, he decides to go and examine to investigate the key card. So he has a key card from the previous episode that's obviously connected to like a storage unit, and he finds a storage unit and he finds the right storage facility, and then the storage unit, and it's set up like a small like base of like a military barracks or something like that, right? With a cot and a bunch of I don't remember if he had like weapons like hung up.
He did. He had a gun. He had a handgun.
He had a handgun, but like there were other things in there as well. I don't know if he had like weapons, like you know how they usually have mounted weapons, like people, like a.
Oh yeah.
But he had other things in there besides the cot, and it was a big storage unit. So, and I assume that Marc has slept there a fair amount of time. It's weird though, because when you go into a storage unit, like a storage facility like that, when they escort you into the facility, they come and get you. They don't let you stay overnight because people try to sleep in those things.
They do.
So yeah, I'm not sure how he managed that. Maybe he sneaks back in at night to sleep there. But yeah, he finds the bag. He finds Marc's passport. He also finds the scarab, so he knows that the thing isn't the events that happened in the previous episode weren't a dream. The events that made him miss his date and also eat steak, which he also mentions in this episode. He thinks
he's very disoriented the whole time. And I think that scene actually reminded me of the first Jason Bourne movie. I mean, he was just remember he was just as disoriented when he came out of the water and stuff like that. He was rescued by some boaters. It was very similar. Like he went to a bank and he saw that his passports and handgun and stuff like that, and he was like, "What the heck's going on? Who am I? Who is this guy?" So very similar in that I just kind of felt that all over again.
Yeah. So he actually has a conversation with once he finds the scarab, Marc actually pops up and he tries to tell him to leave the the storage unit. And he's like, no, I want answers. And and this is when he tells him that his name is Marc Spector, and also that he's the avatar for Khonshu, because Steven, just looking at this storage facility, is like, what am I, like a secret agent, man, or do I work for
exactly?
Do I work for MI6? And he said, nah, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So yeah, that's he tries to. This is his reaction is interesting here, because like I said, he mentions the steak. He's like, "Is this what I get for eating steak?" And then he's like, "I'm leaving. I'm turning myself into the authorities, and hopefully the NHS will pump me with so many drugs that I never see you. I'll never see you again." Because I guess he's trying to do the right thing, right? Because he knows that this identity, this version of him, has killed people. Not necessarily. Well, I don't know if he knows that he's killed people at this point. He knows that this version of him has hurt people, and he, being a good person, he doesn't want to hurt people, right? So he wants to. Yeah. Even though he knows he's gonna lose his freedom, he rather that than know that he is out like hurting people. So he runs away. And then Khonshu kind of chases him in a ghostly way. Right. I'm not sure how. It's not clear to me how he gets out of the facility, because it's like a freeze frame, and then he's outside running, with the bag, and that's when we see Layla. It was just and majority of this episode just as confused as he is, because he's acting weird, because he looks exactly like her husband Marc, and he's insisting that he's not Marc. So yeah, I thought it was interesting when they got back to his apartment. Some of the things that were part of his Steven's personality seemed to be things that were like reminiscent of Layla, his Marc's wife. The fact that he spoke French, and apparently Marc does not speak French. The fact that his favorite poem was her favorite poem. The fact that she can read hieroglyphics, and I assume that Marc cannot read hieroglyphics. So it seems like whenever Marc created this identity of Steven, because in the comics Marc is the primary, and Steven is the alternate. Whenever he created this, he created Steven with like remnants of his wife and the person that he loved. There's some other things that she mentions here. He says that Steven says this is his mother's flat, and then Layla's like, "Are you talking to her again?" And Steven doesn't know what she's talking about there. But it's interesting the way that his face. He's curious because he has been talking to his mother throughout the first episode, but we never hear her. So maybe this makes him think of something in his head, another shoe to drop later on. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do, but as I said in the comics, Steven is the alternate. They might change it and say Marc is the alternate, but Marc seems to have much more of a life, whereas Steven doesn't have that much of an existence. I mean, unless we see his mother, Steven's mother. Marc at least has one other person that can vouch for his existence, which is his wife. So he seems to have much more of a life. He also has a passport, which you can I guess you can fake if you're a spy or something like that. But usually you have to have a birth certificate to get a passport, and we haven't seen any kind of official documents like that for Steven. So he seems to have a low-level job, which you might not need a lot of identification to get, like a gift shop attendant. I don't know how much identification you need for that, but you do need a lot of documentation to get a passport. So, we haven't found out yet who's the alternate, but it's leaning towards Steven being the alternate. So we get Fitzgerald and who's the other? Fitzgerald and Kennedy.
Yeah,
show up to his flat. We find out later posing as police officers. And he probably should have known that because they just have names of like presidents. They're not very, and they're not like very British names. So I don't know.
Right.
They're American presidents. So they take him to Arthur. Arthur has that chat with him, and that's the chat that I was talking about in the beginning. He seems very gentle. He seems to have a very loving community that he's built here in England. Which is interesting because it seems like he has followers around the world because they weren't in England where they were before, and it seems like that entire town was following him as well, right? That wherever that town was, in like Germany or wherever it was in another part of Europe, they seem to be all of his followers too, because the entire town kind of descended on Stephen in the previous episode. But this entire part of London, this entire neighborhood seems to be part of the cult. So his cults is in several countries, it seems. So yeah,
it was very fascinating at times because it was like a very diverse group of people, and they're all collected from around the world, but also the fact that they were speaking in Mandarin. But it was very surprising that Marc actually, no, not Marc, but Stephen actually was saying, "Is that Mandarin?" It's like that was very fascinating to me, into thinking like, how does he know that that's Mandarin?
Well, he said it was, is that Chinese, and Arthur corrected him and said it was Mandarin. I don't know. How's Ethan Hawke's accent? Did you catch what he said? Or I mean,
it was very, I don't know, because I felt as though it was kind of maybe a dialect of Chinese. It definitely was. It probably was not the original Mandarin. I may be wrong. But I've never heard Mandarin spoken like that.
I feel like, I mean, I don't speak Mandarin, but I feel like the girl responding to him sounded more like Mandarin than what he was saying.
Yeah. It may have been accented, or it may be that he had some trouble with it, but I mean, to me, I think that he was speaking in another dialect of Chinese. I don't recognize that. I mean, you probably have. I mean, for people that have seen Shang-Chi, that's pretty much like how Mandarin is spoken. If you saw that movie, this was definitely different. So I don't 100% know. I mean, I had to basically look at the subtitles and saw that they said speaking Mandarin, and I'm like, oh really? He spoke Mandarin? I did not know that. So the tones are much different than what you saw. Say for example, what you saw in the beginning of Shang-Chi, where they were describing, the hundreds of thousands of years that when Wu was alive and things like that. That's like the Chinese that most people would recognize. But like I said, this is much more different from that.
Yeah, I thought it was, whether or not he pronounced the words right or whether it was a different dialect, I thought it was interesting how they were setting up the cult there, like how everyone had to learn 3 languages. It seems to be, I don't know if everyone is vegan, but I think apparently Arthur is vegan as well.
Right.
So this large facility that they're in, they had and then they had the conversation about Amit and Khonshu, and the difference between Amit and Khonshu, and we get the revelation that Arthur used to be the previous avatar of Khonshu, which is definitely a change from the comics. I think Arthur in the comics is just a small character that shows up in like one issue of the comics. So they decided to create a new persona and a new backstory for this character for the show, which is fine. So he can sort of he knows all of Khonshu's tricks. The fact that Khonshu seems not to be able to move things or do anything corporeally in this world except for like move things like slightly around and kind of spook you out, but he can't really. He has to work through his avatar, which also is interesting because in the comics they sort of hint to that, like the reason that he chose Marc is because his mind was already a little fractured. He knew that he knew Marc was going to be sort of a weak a weak vessel, because his ultimate goal was not to have him as just an avatar, but to completely just take him over, so he could run the body. And it seems like at this point, Marc is still too strong for him to do that. But it's interesting that Arthur says that he doesn't have any power except through his avatar. So maybe that is his long-term plan here, to take over Marc's body, so that he has more power in the corporeal world here with the humans. But yeah, because
this sounds very Doctor Strange. It really does. I mean, if you think about it, it's like Arthur's like kind of like Caecilius from the first Doctor Strange. Yeah, and then Khonshu's more like the Ancient One. Very similar in terms of the story. Like I think that he might have Arthur might have been what's it called, burned by Khonshu. He was really into Khonshu's teachings or whatever, and then he's like, he got this illusion, just like how Caecilius is kind of. So we're kind of seeing that some of the parallels to that story there. So very interesting that is kind of like that, and Marc is kind of like the Doctor Strange character, like Stephen Strange right now in some ways.
Well, actually, not Marc. I guess Stephen would be the
Stephen is
Stephen
is Stephen. Yeah,
Stephen is Stephen. Marc is a little further, is deeper in with Khonshu than Stephen is. Stephen is just being introduced to this guy. So like, it mostly is freaked out every time he sees him. Every time. I mean, as you would be, because he's like 8 feet tall, covered in bandages, and he has a floating bird skull. For forehead. So I think that would freak out anyone. Especially the way that he decides to manifest himself is just to pop up like behind you or in front of you and walk very slow. He's very spooky. So Arthur is basically telling Stephen what Khonshu is saying, because he's had him in his head. Like, told him to kill him, told him that he's real justice. So like you said, I think that Arthur maybe got disillusioned by maybe he saw some great tragedy, and people die, and then Khonshu was like, okay, we have to go and kill these people who created this tragedy. And then he was like, why did you let this tragedy happen in the first place? Right. Ahmet wouldn't have let this tragedy happen in the first place. And like I said, this is the part of the conversation where you're sort of with him until like Stephen is like, what about babies?
Yeah, and children. Yeah, exactly.
and children. It's I mean, before that, he says, you can't like kill people because of their thoughts. Like, I think about killing Donna all the time, but I'm not gonna do it.
Right.
So yeah, it is. I mean, this episode isn't as funny as the previous episode, but he's like, when he says to all of them, the way, like, Oscar Isaac's delivery here, when he's like, are all of you into the baby killing? I was like, I feel like I draw the line at the baby killing. It's just might be me, but I draw the line at the baby killing. The way he delivered it was very funny.
But it's definitely very interesting in that again, it reminds for people that did not know, that's pretty much the plot of Minority Report. This was a Tom Cruise movie, talked about pre-crime, people getting arrested for murder or for any type of crimes before it ever happened. So in that sense, is definitely brings up a lot of ethical questions as to whether or not somebody should be judged based upon something that they have not done yet. And they did kind of do that part and have that debate, but at the same time, it's almost like they had to have this debate in a humorous type of way, much more humorous than, say, what happened when you saw Minority Report, which was much more darker and and more dystopian.
I feel like the conversation was dark because they are talking about, Arthur didn't say that he would kill babies, but he implied based on his response, about like cutting off a limb. It might be grotesque, the cut off a limb, but it's the best thing to do. So given his response, he was saying, yes, he killed children, he killed babies. So what they're talking about isn't light. It's definitely dark. It's just the way that Stephen responded is like, okay, you guys are basically you guys are crazy. I'm gonna get out of here. I can't. I think he was with him for a good portion of the conversation, because he was empathizing with him for the same reason that all the people are following him around, right? Right. He has a very light touch. He's very gentle. He's a very he seems to be very sweet. He was trying to talk to him in not hushed tones, but like in a kind way. He's trying to. He's the first person who can speak to Stephen outside of his head about what's happening. Right. The only person he's been able to talk to about this is Marc, and he does not. He's very distrustful of Marc because he knows that Marc has hurt people, and when he was in the car, he found out that Marc zip tied someone and shot them in the back of the head, execution style. Right. So now he's even more afraid of Marc. So this is the first person outside of his head that he's been able to talk to, and this person knows exactly who Khonshu is, knows Khonshu so well that he can recite the things that Khonshu is saying. So yeah, I think he's very comforted, and he would have done anything to help because it's the first help that he got. Until they started talking about baby killing, in which case he was like, yeah, I can't help you. So this is when Layla shows up. This part of the episode is a little far-fetched. There's a lot of those people. I don't know how they got out of there. I mean, I understand not all of them are like trained fighters. They just seem to be like people in the neighborhood. I get that, but like, there's a lot of them. They could have just put their bodies between them and her. And of the two of them, she's the only one who could actually fight. I don't know how she got in there without having too much of a hassle. I'm not sure how they got out of there. That was a little bit of suspending disbelief there, but whatever. So Khonshu, so Marc summons another jackal using Amit's staff, and I guess this is also when we see that it's not just security cameras that can't see the jackal. It's only Marc can see the jackal, because Layla couldn't see the jackal, but the jackal's definitely there because the jackal like threw her around. Right. Before that, we see him transform into Mr. Knight. So like, this is another persona of Moon Knight. It's basically just a suit. So the name of the episode is Summon the Suit, and she keeps saying summon the suit in this part of the conversation, but she's talking to Stephen, and Stephen doesn't know what the suit is. So he summons a suit, and he shows up as Mr. Knight. So this suit, or this persona in the comics, is another identity, and it's more of like he's a crime fighter, but he's a crime fighter with a lighter touch. He's like a consulting detective, like Sherlock Holmes, in the comics. So I'm not sure if that's what they're going to do here, but that's what Mr. Knight persona is supposed to be, like a Sherlock Holmes that consults with the police. It seems like when he transformed, though, he definitely had superpower, because you saw him like pull a bumper off of a car. He like crushed it and then pulled it off. I thought he was going to use it. I thought he was going to use it as a weapon, but it doesn't really occur to Stephen to like any martial arts sort of stuff. The fact that he got a punch in at all was very surprising to me. But I guess with super strength, you can
pretty much do anything.
You can figure something out, right? Even if you don't, even if you're not trained, you can figure something out. So like I definitely want to see this version of him again. And they have this version of him, the Mr. Knight suit, in the art. I hope this isn't the first and only time we see him. I guess what they're doing, if they're not going to make this a separate personality, this is what Stephen will look like when he summons the suit. And he also seemed to have like short bows, like metal bows. I forget what the actual name of those are. So I guess those will be his weapons, as opposed to the crescent moon boomerangs that are the weapons for Moon Knight. So that scene was pretty cool. Then we get a switch over from between Marc and Steven. So Marc takes over and then he turns into Moonlight, and he gets the Jackal to chase him and kills the Jackal. And this is pretty much the end of the episode when we hear that the deal that he did with Khonshu, the reason that he left Layla, rather, is what I meant to say. The reason that he tried to divorce her is because Khonshu wants to get his hooks into her if he leaves her. Right. So I guess we will see. I don't know how much. It seems like their relationship, Marc and Layla's relationship. She hasn't heard a lot. Like, it doesn't see. Did you get a sense that she got a lot of information from Marc about Khonshu and everything? She's like, she knows about the suit, but she's like, like Arthur knows a lot more than she does, and she was married to Marc, so I feel like she knows about the suit, but she doesn't know much of anything about what's going on with Marc. So I don't know how long ago this happened to Marc, but it doesn't seem like it was a very long time, or he just didn't confide in his wife.
Probably not. I just believe that obviously she knows that he is Moon Knight, when she said summon the suit, but I don't think that she knows more than that in terms of the avatars, in terms of Arthur, in terms of the different types, definitely the different personalities. I mean, going back to
she was confused for most of the episode.
Yeah, going back to where he was in the apartment, he was basically saying, this is my apartment, and she didn't really believe him at all. And also that they had divorce papers, and he was, Steven was very heartbroken. He was like, what's going on? Divorce? What? Yeah. Like, what's going on? Like, I wouldn't divorce you. What are you talking about? So it was kind of strange in that they don't Marc did not reveal too much to him, and it makes sense. He might have, he's a mercenary, so he probably travels a lot. He probably goes everywhere a lot. But then what happened was that he lost track of her pretty much when he became Steven, and that's kind of where it'll be very interesting to kind of see what happened before the first episode. Like, how did they separate? Maybe they'll do a flashback episode, maybe in one of these times where you can flashback to like right before the first episode as to how it kind of he splits off into Steven and kind of went out of his way. It seems as though from my standpoint, it seems as though it might be due to stress that Marc is being summoned. I mean, from the first episode was pretty obvious that when he was in a very stressful situation, like he would Marc, like a very dangerous emergency stressful situation.
Yeah, when he broke his jaw is when he woke up the first time in the middle of the mission.
Yeah. I know. I just think that when Marc is being summoned, it's always in some sort of it's almost as though it's like a very stressful emergency situation. Well, that's what I'm trying to think about. But it doesn't make any sense. As the Jackal came in, he was very hesitant. I'm talking about the first episode. He was very hesitant about.
Yeah, I don't think it's a stressful situation. So at the end of the episode, Marc has taken over, and Steven is in the mirror. And this is the first time we've seen Steven in the mirror, and he's like, I don't like it. It takes a lot of energy for him to even appear in the mirror, and I think that's the same for Marc. It takes a lot of energy to appear to the dominant personality, and to talk to the dominant personality when you're not the dominant personality. So the dominant personality has to give up the body. And Marc says this. It's like when Steven tries to take over the body again, he can. He's like, I don't know what's going on, but apparently when the dominant one has more power when this is happening. He doesn't know why the walls between the personalities are sort of breaking down. I mean, they're not completely broken down. definitely separate personalities. They're different people talking to each other. But in the past, he hasn't been able to talk to Marc or Steve. Steven hasn't been able to talk to Marc. Marc hasn't been able to talk to Steven. I think Khonshu never talked to Steven before. And the only reason he talked to Steven was because he showed up in the middle of a mission. So yeah. So something is going on with Marc beyond being possessed by a moon god, and having multiple personalities. That's his baseline. Being possessed by a moon god and having multiple personalities is his baseline. And there's something else going on beyond that. So, and I guess we'll see a shoe drop on about what's happening there. It might have to do with the fact that they're getting close to releasing Ahmet, or Ahmet is being close to being released. Maybe it is Marc's. Maybe it's Marc and Steven's proximity to Andrew. Is it Arthur? Maybe it's Arthur. Yeah. Maybe it's their proximity to Arthur, given that Arthur used to be Khonshu's avatar. Maybe that's what's maybe that's what's breaking down the walls between them. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely something that dealing with the supernatural and also dealing with just all these mysteries is very interesting. I think that it's much more interesting, I would say, than the other Disney Plus episodes. I mean, those were like pretty fun in many ways. This is much more, like you mentioned, Nathan, a little more. I don't know how I would describe this.
They were more straightforward.
Yeah.
I mean, except for WandaVision, which there definitely was a mystery in the middle of that, and you were trying to figure out what was going on there. They were more straightforward in general. I mean, there were small mysteries here and there, but the main character himself being in a mystery wasn't necessarily a thing in any of the episodes, any of the other shows. So yeah. So
yeah, that's true. That's probably where I'm more intrigued than, say, the other ones. Like you said, it's much more straightforward. It's maybe even predictable, whereas this one is kind of, I don't know, but it's probably because I'm not as familiar with Moon Knight. I haven't read the comics, so I don't know where this is going in a lot of ways. Whereas in the previous iterations of the Disney Plus shows, I kind of know what was going on, with the exception of Loki. I would say Loki was probably, there's some mysteries that were there that I was like, oh, that's really fascinating. This is really fascinating. So it's kind of like, I think that I would compare it to Loki, where I didn't know what was going to happen. I really don't. Whereas the other three or four, I was like, okay, I kind of know where this is going.
Well, you didn't really know what was going on with Wanda until like the second to last episode, when they went back in time and they showed you what was happening with Wanda.
That's true too.
why there were television shows, why everything was splitting back and forth. They only showed you that when Agatha had her down in the basement and they went back and through her memories. So that was also weird, and there was a lot of speculation every week, because I remember when we were doing those videos, we actually had like breakdown videos like pointing out what the clues could be. They're less like, it's interesting because these shows are done by the same studio, but they're done by different teams. So there aren't as many Easter eggs in the background of these episodes as they were in WandaVision, where you could like obsess over things. Whereas I feel like the set decorator in WandaVision put like weird things in the background from Wanda in the comic books past. And a lot of those things were just red herrings, and they were just cool things that people put in the production designer put in there, because the production designer looked at the history of Wanda Maximoff. Even if those things were in the background for Steven, the fact of the matter is that the Steven's Moon Knight rather character has been written by so many different people, and they change it every time a new person takes up the character. You can really pull from any one of them, or it seems like what they're doing is like making up new things and just pulling what they want. whereas Wanda, her background was inconsistent to a certain degree, because at one point she was a mutant, and then she wasn't a mutant because Fox owned the mutants, and they wanted to put Wanda in the Marvel in the Marvel shows. Sorry, the Marvel movies. So in the comics, they made her not a mutant. So that was a little inconsistent, and how she was born was a little inconsistent. But for years, her power set was always consistent, and the stories and things were always consistent. I think there was a little bit more to pull from, to put in the background for Wanda than there is for Moon Knight. So they can really make up whatever they want, because people are less familiar with this character from the from the beginning. So yeah,
exactly.
All right. Any other observations, thoughts, predictions for the next couple weeks?
I mean, like I said, I'm very much enjoying the mystery behind it, and just this kind of turn toward the supernatural is very interesting in a lot of ways, because again, we have barely scratched the surface on the supernatural stuff right now. So trying to see where it takes us, and to, I mean, we have we're about a third of the way through so far. So there's probably going to as any. Yeah, as to sorry, my math got screwed up. But anyways, I think that again, there are going to be some reveals at the end. I think that there's going to be, like you said, more shoes to drop. But again, it's really interesting, and I look forward to more episodes as we move along the next few weeks.
So 1 second, sorry, I don't know. We don't have 8 episodes. We have 6 episodes. We are a third of
6 episodes. This is the 6 episode event.
So what we end up in this episode, we are in Giza in Egypt. So
yes.
I guess we're gonna get some flashbacks. Like you said, at the beginning of this episode, we don't get a lot of information about how Marc found himself in the situation that he is in. So I assume in the next episode we're gonna get some flashbacks to that. Because we find him in an apartment. The word is escaping me. It's not an apartment, but there's a different word for. I think it's Riyadh, in Giza, overlooking the pyramids. So we're gonna get a lot of scenes in the desert next week. So looking forward to that. Yeah,
definitely.
And probably some and. If you've seen any of the featurettes that Marvel is dropping pretty much every other day now for Moon Knight, they shoot a lot of things in like Egyptian set decoration and production design. So I think you're gonna get a lot of background on some Khonshu and some of the other gods, maybe some of that stuff in the next episodes. That should be cool. So looking forward to that. All right, well. That is what we think, what we want to hear what you guys think. So please comment down below to join the conversation. Like and subscribe to get more content like this. And we will see you next time. All right, guys. Bye.